To stop his workers from stealing chicken, the owner of a factory locked the exits from the outside. Then, it caught fire. This is the story of a massacre born of calculated corporate greed in a town most Americans have never heard of. What followed was one of the most preventable tragedies in American history. A massacre born of corporate negligence. In the next 8 minutes, we go back to 1991. We'll look at the faces of 25 people who died against a locked door, and how the man responsible walked free in under 4 years. We'll tell you the single sentence that silenced the entire courtroom. Hamlet, North Carolina, was once a thriving railroad hub. By the early 90s, the tracks were quiet and the money was gone. The town was desperate for work. When Imperial Food Products arrived, it felt like a lifeline for the community. The plant processed chicken for fast food chains. The work was hard, hot, and low-paid, but it was steady. Mostly women worked the lines, single mothers who had few other options in a town where the factory was king. For 11 years, the factory ran around the clock. In all that time, it was never once inspected by safety officials. Grease built up on the floors and the ceilings. Fire hazards were everywhere, but the doors remained open for business. Emmett Rowe, the owner, was known for his aggressive business style. He had moved his plant from Pennsylvania to escape regulation. In North Carolina, he found exactly what he wanted: cheap labor and a state government that looked the other way. Rowe was paranoid about his workers stealing chicken. He believed they were sneaking product out the back exits. He also hated that they propped doors open to get relief from the sweltering heat of the industrial fryers. His solution was simple and cruel. He ordered every fire exit to be padlocked shut from the outside during shifts. The workers were sealed inside. The factory was no longer just a workplace. It was a high-risk cage. September 3rd, 1991. The morning shift was in full swing. The heat in the plant was already rising. 90 people were inside. They were working fast to meet the day's quota, unaware of the failure beneath them. At 8:15 a.m., a hydraulic line near a massive fryer ruptured. A fine mist of fluid hit the open burners. A fireball exploded. Grease on the floor and walls ignited instantly. The plant was engulfed in seconds. The lights went out. The smoke was thick, toxic, and blinding. Workers scrambled through the dark toward the exits. They reached for the door handles, desperate for air. But the doors wouldn't budge. They were trapped. They reached for the door handles, desperate for air. But the doors wouldn't budge. They were trapped. In the chaos, some sought refuge in the massive walk-in freezer. They thought the cold would protect them. But the smoke was relentless. It found every crack. The freezer became a secondary tomb for 18 people. 18 people were found inside that freezer. They had tried to breathe through the cracks, but the smoke was too thick. When the fire was finally extinguished, 25 people were dead. Another 54 were severely injured. The town of Hamlet was broken. Families were devastated, and a community was left to wonder how this could happen. Investigators found the padlocks. They found the chains. The evidence of corporate negligence was scattered everywhere. They found that the plant had not been inspected by the state in its entire 11-year history. Not once. The tragedy exposed a massive failure of the state's safety systems. Hamlet became a national symbol of industrial ruin. Emmett Rowe was charged with 25 counts of involuntary manslaughter. The trial was the focus of the nation. In a plea bargain, he pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to nearly 20 years in prison. Justice seemed to be served. But the families were betrayed. Just over 3 years later, Emmett Rowe walked out of prison a free man. He was granted parole, having served less than 4 years for the deaths of 25 people. The outrage was absolute. During the trial, a survivor testified. She was asked why she didn't just use the regular exits to escape. She looked at the court and said, "There were no exits. They locked us in." The room went cold. The defense was broken. For the survivors, the fire never ended. Many suffer from permanent respiratory damage and severe PTSD. They lost their jobs, their health, and their friends. The community was left to pick up the pieces with no support. OSHA issued a record fine of over $800,000. It was the largest in state history, but it couldn't bring anyone back. Much of that money was never paid. The company filed for bankruptcy, leaving the victims with almost nothing. When the plant closed, Hamlet lost its biggest employer. The economic fallout was just as devastating as the fire itself. The town was left in a cycle of poverty and grief, a community forever scarred by a tragedy that should never have happened. We remember Josephine Sharkey, a mother of 3 who died trying to save her co-workers. Her sacrifice will not be forgotten. We remember every soul lost. They were not just statistics. They were people with dreams and families who loved them. Investigators later discovered that Rowe had a history of safety violations in his previous plants in Pennsylvania. He had moved south to avoid the strict inspections of the North. He knew the risks, and he took them anyway. For the town of Hamlet, the grief was communal. Everyone knew someone who was in the plant that morning. The town was united in its pain, and united in its demand for justice. A demand that was ultimately met with disappointment. The OSHA failure was systemic. The state had only 60 inspectors for over 180,000 workplaces. It was a disaster waiting to happen. The tragedy forced a massive overhaul of North Carolina's labor laws. More inspectors were hired, and regulations were tightened. Today, fire safety in factories is a top priority. But that progress was built on the lives of 25 people in Hamlet. We must remember their names, not just as victims, but as people who were failed by the very systems designed to protect them. Their story is a reminder that corporate greed has a human cost, and that cost is far too high. We must never forget. If you believe their names deserve to outlive the men who failed them, share this story. Keep the light burning. Stay close. 25 people. For chicken. Was that justice? Tell me what you think below. I'm Lantern and Ash. Stay close. 25 people. For chicken. Was that justice? Tell me what you think below. I'm Lantern and Ash. Stay close. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it to keep their memory alive. I'm Lantern and Ash. Stay close. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it to keep their memory alive. I'm Lantern and Ash. Stay close.